Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Winning Streak. I am your host, Bryson, and quickly before we get into the video, pointing out the obvious, it has been quite a while since I have been active on YouTube. If you are a subscriber who kind of follows along, it's definitely been a while. It's been very, very busy in my life, Zeke's life, Parker's life. We've just been doing a lot of stuff with college starting and job starting and everything, so definitely trying to get back into it. I'm definitely hoping to have Parker and Zeke back on for an episode in the next week or two here. But for now, starting off today with my NFL awards predictions. I'm gonna go over like all the major ones that people really care about, and kind of just giving a brief explanation. Some of them will have a longer explanation. It just depends. So I'm kind of just going in a random order. Starting off with Coach of the Year. So for each of my categories, I did a top three. So starting off from first to third, just going in order, I said number one should be Kevin O'Connell. For anyone who's a casual who just watches football, doesn't know the background, he was the Vikings coach this year, led them to a 14-3 record, even though their rookie quarterback got hurt preseason. Honestly, just led his team to a fantastic year, and a lot of people give all the credit to Sam Darnold, which is definitely partially true. I'll give him a lot of credit where it's due later on in the video as well. But Kevin O'Connell definitely did his thing. His team was 14-3, number two in their division, only because they had one of the craziest divisions in history. Lions were number one, obviously. So kind of self-explanatory, honestly, if you look at it. My number two, I kind of hate to bring it up because of this flag here behind me, but Dan Quinn is my number two. He's the Commanders head coach, led them to a 12-5 record. Also, a similar situation. Everyone rightfully giving mostly all the praise to the quarterback, young rookie Jaden Daniels. We'll get into that too later in the video. But a lot more people should be looking at Dan Quinn and what he did bring into this team. The offense was destined to be great this season after they drafted Jaden Daniels and gave him that young receiver core, the good running back core, and bringing in a defensive minded head coach to upgrade the defense a little bit helped out for sure. Coming in at number three for my Coach of the Year award predictions, I have Jim Harbaugh. He coached in 11-6 Chargers, so you look at it on paper, it doesn't look great just off the bat. But he just came into this team. It was his first year, and they had a pretty slow start. But if you watch the last half of the season, they definitely picked it up and knew what they were doing. And moving forward, they're going to have a lot of success. Honorable mention goes to Dan Campbell. He obviously had a fantastic year. I just didn't mention him because the other guys proved themselves this year and he was already proven. And I'm not a huge fan of his kind of fun, risky play calling that everyone seems to love. So I kind of lowered him a little bit myself. Getting into my Comeback Player of the Year award. Starting off, I think it's a pretty even. Number one and number two are interchangeable for me, and they just have such different reasons. My number one is Sam Darnold. He had 4,319 yards, which is fifth in the league, 35 touchdowns, which was also fifth, 12 interceptions, and a QBR of 60.5. And previous year, he had 297 yards, two touchdowns, one interception, and 50.1 QBR. So obviously, some of you are going to hear that or look at that and say, well, he was a starter this year. He was thrown into an opportunity to start more games, get more stats. Duh, first of all, but he proved that he can definitely keep up in the league and that he belonged to some of the top names this season and showed it every single game this season. He really only had about one or two, maybe three, I don't want to say three, I guess if you include playoffs, bad games. So if you look at it from that standpoint, the jump he had from season to season and just this season compared to any in his career was pretty insane. Now my number two is kind of hard to go against him as well because I have Joe Burrow. He was number one in pass yards and touchdowns, only had 9 interceptions and a 74.7 QBR, but he was a proven elite quarterback who came back from injury. So, yes, it's a comeback, but in my eyes, he didn't revive his career with this year. Everyone knew he was still going to be obviously usable and most likely elite, Sam Darnold really came in and came back and revived his career. And considering he shouldn't have even been given this chance, I feel like that's a bigger comeback story than anything. And my number three, honestly, just an honorable mention, J.K. Dobbins. He had 905 rushing yards, which was 22nd, and 9 touchdowns, which was 14th. And the previous year, he had one game played after a bad injury on the Ravens. So, pretty good comeback for him. He'll be good for years to come, I hope. And I hope he does not get injured again. Getting into my defensive rookie of the year, I think it's a pretty obvious number one with Jared Verse. He had 66 tackles, 36 solo, 4.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. He's definitely going to be a defensive player of the year in the next 5 years, if not top three for a few of those years. My number two, I had Quinion Mitchell. He had 46 total tackles, 37 solo, no sacks, a forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. So he definitely played at a pretty high level for a rookie year, just not quite to Jared Verse's level. And then my number three, slightly biased compared to some of the other rookies statistically, but I said Chop Robinson. He had 26 tackles, 16 solo, but he had 6 sacks, and I thought that was pretty good on his end. Now, for Offensive Rookie of the Year, this was the award that came into my head every time I thought about how I wanted to make this video, just because I originally wanted to make this video a few weeks ago, and it was a lot closer in my mind between the number one and number three, actually. So, number one, I had Jayden Daniels. He had 3,568 pass yards, 891 rushing, 25 pass touchdowns, 6 rush touchdowns, only 9 interceptions, and he brought a 4-13 Commanders team to the NFC Championship as a rookie. So, really, I mean, there's just not much of a competition for that award when you look at it. He had an unbelievable year. Not even just compared to the other rookies of this year. Historically, he had a pretty insane year. And once again, it hurts to be a Cowboys fan knowing we're going to be the number three team for the next few years, probably. But moving into better things, my number two was Brock Bowers. He had 112 receptions, which was third in the league. 1,194 yards, which was 8th, 5 touchdowns, and 3 different awful quarterbacks. I like to consider his season the best rookie tight end season in history, honestly. I don't know if it's really arguable or who would want to argue that, but when you look at it statistically, he was breaking records left and right after, there was a few games left in the season. It seemed like every game he was doing something that's never been done. He's just reaching new numbers, and he already looks like an experienced veteran out there. Lastly, number three, I had him tied for number one with Jayden Daniels for a lot of the season. Bo Nix, he had 3,775 passing yards, which is more, but 431 rushing, and then 29 pass touchdowns, 4 rush, 12 interceptions, and brought back a struggling Broncos team and receiving core. I look at this and definitely it honestly shows a lot about Russell Wilson, which is very off topic, but you look at a rookie like Bo Nix, who I did not expect. Honestly, I might be a casual for this. I didn't expect anything from him coming into the league. I thought he'd be decent, but I never thought he would have a rookie season like he did, or look like he's going to shape out to what he is. So I think he has big things to come for sure, and I think he's going to be a good player. I just think he had a pretty bad year to be in a Rookie of the Year race. Now, getting into the top three favorite awards as far as I'm concerned. Defensive Player of the Year. I had number one as Pat Surtain. In 92 snaps against 5 AFC Pro Bowlers this season, he allowed 6 receptions on 16 targets for 56 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Definitely some crazy numbers there. And he also has 45 tackles, 34 solo, a forced fumble, and 4 interceptions. So he just had a really good all-around season. He's the elite lockdown defender of the league, so you really just gotta give it to him, give him credit where it's due. My number two was one of the best off-season pickups the league had this year. The Eagles had so many, but Zach Bond, he had 151 tackles, 93 solo, 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and an interception. So he had an all-around elite year, and he just looks like a star for sure. He's a great pickup. Their defense is great, and it's usually because of him. My number 3, I know I'm going to get hate for not putting my honorable mention as at least number 3, but my number 3 is Trey Hendrickson. 46 tackles, 33 solo, 17.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. In my eyes, the defensive player of the year doesn't have to be the sack leader every year, but I think they have like one of the best arguments for sure. So I at least have to give him credit. I would like to put him as number 1, but the other two just had such a good year. And then TJ Watt is my honorable mention. People are really not going to like that, but it's just my opinion. He is a absolute force though, and very elite. He's just I didn't completely see anything from him as much as I did them, unfortunately. Now getting into my offensive player of the year predictions. Number 1, I had Saquon Barkley, the Eagles' other amazing addition. 2,005 yards, which is first in the league. 13 touchdowns, which is 8th. 278 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. And he led Philly to the Super Bowl. And he's been having an absolutely historic playoff run. I'm pretty sure he's had 100+ rushing yards in the last about 5 games. And heading into the Super Bowl, I'm definitely looking to see what he does, but I think they will be announcing his name as the offensive player of the year beforehand. My second player, like Bo Nix, he had an amazing year. It's just a bad year to be in this race. You could argue his achievement is a lot more impressive because he is the Triple Crown winner, being Ja'Marr Chase. He had 127 receptions, 1.7K yards, and 17 touchdowns. And if you're not familiar with the Triple Crown term, he was number 1 in all of those categories in the entire league. So the fact that him and Joe Burrow were able to pull that kind of stuff off on that struggling team is honestly pretty amazing. You wish you could have seen them go further, but I do think if they give the Offensive Player of the Year award to Ja'Marr, shouldn't be any hard feelings because that's a pretty crazy feat. In the number 3, I had Derrick Henry. He had 1,921 yards, 16 touchdowns, 193 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, and the second best year of his career after switching teams. He was the missing piece Lamar needed, other than probably another wide receiver, hopefully. But looking at him this season, he looked absolutely elite. He would just break through. You could not stop him, as always. And a lot of people were saying he was regressing before the season or the last couple of years. But I honestly think he shut all that up this year, and everyone is looking forward to him next year. Now, finally, the one that most people probably clicked on the video for, my MVP predictions for the year. Honestly, number 3 is pretty arguable, but when it comes to number 1 and 2, everybody knows it's down to a 2-man race, and I'm here to kind of give the in-depth kind of elaboration. When you look at it, MVP number 1 is Lamar Jackson. 4,172 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, which most of them were not even his fault. 915 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. He did have 8 fumbles, but he also led his team to a great season with a 12-5 record alongside Derrick Henry. He had an unbelievable season. I feel like obviously people are talking about his season because he's in the MVP talk, but I still don't think he's being talked about enough. This is a ridiculous season on paper, and watching him was also just ridiculous. Now, number 2, credit where it's due, I have Mr. Josh Allen. He had 3,731 passing yards, 28 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 531 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, and 1 fumble. He did lead his team to 13-4 with minimal help, which could be arguable for some people, but I don't know who wants to argue that. He really didn't have that much help compared to Lamar, people are going to say, which is true, but they are still very big statistical differences. And yes, Josh Allen went further. And yes, Josh Allen's team had a more successful record, but they arguably had easier games in the regular season. And when it comes to the awards, postseason does not matter, unfortunately. So, as far as I'm concerned, at least. So, looking at it, I definitely see Lamar as your MVP. Number 3, I definitely see Saquon being there. I can see why a lot of people think that, and I definitely wouldn't disagree. However, Although his team had a terrible season, he was let down by defense and coaching, missed the playoffs with a 9-8 record. Joe Burrow had 4,918 passing yards, which is first place. 43 passing touchdowns, which is also first. Only 9 interceptions, 200 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Running is not his game. And he also had 2 fumbles. If Joe Burrow's team had 3 more wins and at least made the playoffs, I know that's a big difference, but hear me out. Like, it's a no-brainer. Joe Burrow's stats were off the charts this year. Lamar definitely had ridiculous rushing stats, especially for a quarterback. But when you're looking at Joe Burrow's stats from this year, it's just unbelievable if you don't take into consideration the team success factor. He did his part for sure. Jamar did his part. Team let them down big time. That is all I have for today. I definitely hope anyone who's new here enjoyed the video. Anyone returning, I hope you guys stuck around. I appreciate any support coming to this video, as it's definitely been a while. Like I said, I definitely look to get back in a more consistent routine and schedule, and I want to produce better content for everybody. I want to do fun things. I got big ideas coming, but give some time to work with it, and I definitely got some big plans for this year. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.